Bombardier has had challenges financially and with its C-Series for a long time. So I think it's actually quite separate from anything happening specifically on the Canada-US front at the moment. Do I think that we will see these kinds of WTO challenges? That also didn't surprise me. It is something that should have been anticipated that Brazil would launch a WTO case. I also think, though, that I have a lot of confidence in our trade officials, and so I hope that they've structured it all in a way that will work in Canada's favor. On the tax front, the House Republicans and Congress is very keen to bring in corporate tax reform. And depending on how they do that, it could work in Canada's favor, because if American business picks up and responds to that, Canada could be brought along with it. So we would experience a positive bump in our own GDP and economic growth as a result of being brought along with the American economy, if you will. But on the other side, if the US reforms are so great that they make the United States a very, very positive place for business to establish itself, then Canada will become a less attractive place for business. And we do run some risk that businesses will pick up and move south if it's in their interest to do so. So that's why I think that there are bigger issues. The other thing about tax reform that's important relative to the sort of Canada-US international relationship is that American corporate tax reform is something that can be done domestically. And if Donald Trump engages in a way that is popular with Republicans in Congress, then he can be successful in achieving those reforms domestically without ever having to negotiate with another country. Engaging in negotiations on NAFTA requires him to negotiate with 2 other countries and 2 other administrations. And there's always risk in that because we're separate sovereign countries. So for him, one of the ways that he can be extremely successful, and there could be externalities on the economic front for Canada, is just by focusing entirely on the American domestic front. Well, I think that the most difficult part of any negotiation process is dealing with the issues that are politically sensitive at home, domestically, and that are of interest to the other side. So every time leaders need to work, generally when leaders become involved in a negotiation, and the level that I was working at was at the leader level, it's at those times on those very sensitive issues where domestic interests at home are sensitive, and where there are strong lobbies at home, and where there are strong political interests at home, and those issues are on the table. So those are always the hardest things for any leaders. And we saw it in the EU on the issue of ISDS. This was a very sensitive political issue in the European Union, less politically sensitive for Canada, but for European leadership, it became a really difficult negotiation at the end. And Minister Freeland, who was trade minister at the time, did a great job of finalizing that aspect of it. I think that the Canadian side on the European Union agreement is doing a very good job. They've done an excellent job working on the final pieces of ISDS, and I'm hopeful and confident that the Canadian side has done everything that it can. Any continuing hiccups on the European agreement, I believe, will actually be coming from the European side, and so our officials on our side can only do so much. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, of course, has been a difficult thing for me to watch the last little while after U.S. President withdrew the American support. I do think that there are going to be real challenges ahead for the completion of any kind of Trans-Pacific deal without the United States. And so I think it's inevitable that any future deal is going to look quite different. So I'm certain that our Canadian officials are engaged with other TPP partners discussing which aspects of the deal they would like to continue with and which countries they might like to move forward with. But those are two of the thoughts that I have on that.